loved and hated in equal measure. It seems that's Sultan, as he is also popularly known as. But now we want to change focus and look at the state of the nation. And I have a set of panelists who will drive this conversation on the state of the nation. The most common face among them is lawyer Paul and political analyst Paul Aol. I also have Kangundo Member of Parliament-elect Fabian Muli and Nandi County Senator-elect Samson Cherargei. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this morning. And looking at some of the things that we have on the state of the nation this morning, let's start with what Kenyans are waiting to see how it's going to pan out, and this is to do with the petition that is before the courts right now, with, of course, the 7-judge bench giving out regulations and very stringent conditions as to what should and should not be said. Let me start with you, Paul, as a member of the bar and a lawyer, on your thoughts on basically the restrictions or conditions given by the 7-judge bench regarding what the politicians should say, and even we in the media.
Basically, I think the Supreme Court want to ensure that the legal issues are dealt with by the courts. The problem with politicians is that sometimes they want to begin putting unnecessary pressure, or such that they ensure that what is in the public mind is how the decision should turn out to be. The problem with that is that, unfortunately, it put the expectation on the mind of Wananchi, such that Wananchi don't even concentrate on what are the legal issues before the court. The danger with it is basically that when Wananchi begin looking at judges and they begin imagining that if it is this one, which direction is he likely to take? If it is this one, which direction is he likely to take? It simply means that more or less, there are people who would have made up their mind that this court is not going to look at the legal issues raised, but they've already decided, either because of where they come from or because of the political affiliations, on what the decision, the final decision will be. Mm-hmm. So I think the Supreme Court want, first of all, to instill public confidence, to tell the nation that we will deal with the issues raised as they are raised, and we will deal with them judiciously. Mm-hmm. And they're telling the politicians that you guys have done your work. Let us also do our work, but don't set us up against the public such that the public already tend to think that either we've already made up our decisions even before we sit or before even we begin this process.
All right, and let me come to you, Fabian Muli. And politicians are largely blamed for where we are, especially just like Paul Aol mentions, one of the reasons why this becomes a very major case to look at, based on even the name of the judges, people may already begin to think that this will go this way or that way. And politicians basically are blamed for that. Do you see a time in Kenya where we can have people look at things objectively as opposed from being reduced to where somebody comes from or what is their surname?
Okay, I think this is what is public interest and this is what in the court. When you say that politicians will stop politicizing what in the court, I don't see when there is problem. When I say I'm feeling or I'm seeing or I'm hoping, what is the problem? The independency of the court still remains independency. This court has an exclusive authority to bring us the judgment. And the judgment which are waiting to come from the court has to come with the factual evidence which is demonstrated in the court. So I don't see when we go to the media and they say that this is what we're feeling, I don't see any effect.
You don't feel like that would bring prejudice against the court as to how they should judge, or maybe even public pressure?
One thing you need to understand, the Supreme Court has a lot of independence. And the judges, they should not use any excuse. They are only supposed to follow the evidence demonstrated in the court and give us the outcome or the proper verdict or the judgment of the case. Mm-hmm. We cannot be saying that because somebody was in Mombasa, somebody was in Kisumu, somebody was in Machako, say that this one will influence the outcome of the court. The outcome of the case is supposed to be the evidence provided at that time. So I don't see where it come to be like there is politics or this side or this somebody come from this tribe. I saw something in the media, they are saying that somebody was dining with so and so. Even if you are a judge, even if you are a police officer, even if you are a teacher, even if you are a member of parliament, you have the right of freedom of association. Does not mean that if today I'm sitting with you sitting here, I'm supporting your ideas. I have to articulate with the principles set for that purpose. The principles and the authority of this Supreme Court. Today, the judge who is there might have my name, might have another tribe name, sit down, you dinner with him, but he's supposed to give us the judgment as per the set procedures.
All right, Honorable Cherargei, your thoughts?
I think on mine is that there is no problem because the right to information is one of the basic human rights that any Kenyan should have. And why is it that Supreme Court are worried that politicians or even Kenyans are having a discussion on what should happen?
I think the issue is not so much having a discussion, but having a discussion that is discussing the merits and demerits of what is in court.
No, I agree. We should not be discussing such, but of course the courts have a power, not as my learned friend would have said, is that the courts do not, the public should not be discussing a matter that is already in court. But I think there is a thin line on right to information, and also there is a thin line on what should be discussed based on Supreme Court. So on my own accord, I don't see any problem when us politicians or any Kenyan discuss. But the issue is we should not be discussing based on who sits on the Supreme Court, because there are 7 wise gentlemen who can make a decision. But the fact that you come from particular sub-tribe should not be imagined that you belong to particular political affiliation, and therefore you should decide based on which political side. But on the issue of discussing, I don't see any problem. But on the issue of discussing merits or the merits of the case, I think the rules of the courts apply. So I don't. But Paul, the right to information.
Listening to the two politicians, then one is left wondering whether the Supreme Court's, directive is something that is going to be followed, and whether we fully understand. Maybe from a legal perspective, what is it? What are the guidelines? What is it that we are allowed to discuss and not discuss, and to what extent?
Basically, first of all, to be realistic, there's very little the Supreme Court can do to implement the directive that we are not supposed to discuss the merits or the demerits of the case. I think it's they just want to cool down the tempers, because I'm just looking at what basically it means. One, we are coming from an election where, regardless of who won, all of them have at least, Raila has more than 6 million votes. Uhuru, if we agree that he got that, he has more than 8 million votes. So imagine if you are from whichever camp, whether you're from Jubilee or from NASA, you are talking to at least, or you have at least 6 million people who listen to you. For example, you see there are things that a common mwananchi might not understand. Like, for example, the Supreme Court is allowed to deliver a 1-page document, then now deliver the full judgment after 14 days. But when a politician comes and says, we are watching you, let us not hear that you want to give us a 2-page judgment.
Or like we have heard, they've said that unlike 2013,
yes.
Don't give us a summary. Let us know how you... Yeah.
Yes.
Is
so I think the Supreme Court want to first of all tell Wananchi that if you look at what guides the operation of our courts, we have such a right such that we can do it that way. But you see, when a politician has already gone out and say, if we will not accept if you do this, he has already, or some people who listen to him, have already decided that, oh, so-and-so had already told us that you guys were going to do this way. You see, the biggest problem there is, that's why it is, first of all, elections are seriously emotive issues, because people have invested so much, even emotionally. Not, you see, like elections, there are people who stand to gain, but there are also who stand to gain, or they've invested so emotionally that if so-and-so wins, then it's a good thing for the soul. And they are unable to take that such a thing has not happened. But you see also the other truth that we also must say, in Kenya, we listen so much to politicians than we listen to anybody else. Like, it's so easy to get Uhuru Park full when politicians have called a meeting at Uhuru Park than even if it is pastors or the provincial administration. So I think the Supreme Court are just being realistic and saying they know for a fact
these people command a certain
these people
crowd.
command and people listen to them. So in the event that they already begin giving or saying that it should come this way, then it is already setting up the Supreme Court against the general public. Because you don't want a situation where, because even these Supreme Court judges, they're also human beings. They also go to shop in supermarkets. They also go to churches.
Okay. Let me pause you a bit and come to you, Honorable Muli. Isn't it possible? After all, it's only 14 days that the Supreme Court is saying, give us these 14 days to do our work and deliver our judgment without interference, and also without the public necessarily being influenced to think in a certain way. Because we know that politicians would obviously want to influence the electorate to think in a certain way, even in advance. So 14 days, is that too much to ask for from the Supreme Court to just say, give us the 14 days to do our work? We gave you your, is it 6 months to campaign? You did your campaigns. Now give us 14 days to do our work.
Thank you. I think there is something which we need to understand here. As much as you talk about politicians, there is a bit of oversight. A lot of oversight of this country is done by politicians. So we keep on saying politician will command this, politician will say this. The reason why we politicians, we are here, because we take a lot of work of oversight. And there is judicial, there is the legislation and the executive. When we say judicially we don't want this, we are doing a bit of oversight. So the excuse of saying that we want our independence to be given this and this.
And where does that leave the judiciary as being independent? The judiciary is meant to be independent of the same offices that you've mentioned, but they're supposed to do their work. So if your oversight and that is in a public forum, where is the independence?
Okay, we are talking about the issues of democracy. We are in democracy country, where I will say what I feel, and that keeps also the part of oversight, to make the community know this is where we are and this is where we are heading. We have to keep the judges on toes to give us the right judgment. If we keep on quiet and wait till they tell us even the time we gave is not enough, 14 days is more, even 5 days is enough to give us a right judgment. What you need to see the evidence provided. I saw IBC give 54,000 documents. I saw NASA, we had given, I think, 9,000 documents. So it is their duty. It is their duty now, because they took the job. They say they are able to do the job. We don't know 54,000 documents how they will be read, but we want the proper.
But that's the point. You've given them this amount of evidence. You've just admitted you don't know how they're going to go through it, but yet you want to interfere and say that you want them to do a judgment in a certain way.
This is an institution. When you are given work to do, the judicial is an institution. They have to know how to distribute the pages and give us the conclusion. And then I told you the judgment has to come from evidence. We might have menu lalabalo in the street, what, this will happen. But me, what I say, you should not threaten the court. The only bit which you should keep very far from the Supreme Court is threats. Threatening the court, that is what brings now improper activities and out of discrepancies. So I think 14 days is enough for them to give us a proper judgment, and they should not also let us. We discuss what they are doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Samson, is 14 days too much to ask for the Supreme Court, for politicians to keep off?
No, I think, I think my brother should know that before any judgment is made, there must be a reasoning. And it is not that the judiciary or the judges will just make a judgment without reason. I think 14 days is sufficient, so that they have been the ones, the NASA has been the ones asking. I remember the other day in Mombasa, Honorable Musalia saying we don't want a 2-minute ruling that the courts will give. So 14 days is more than sufficient, so that we can have a proper reasoning, and also to allow that everybody should be satisfied, so that we can give time to Kenyans also to interrogate, and even both sides, because as he has said, 54,000 that IBC has submitted, and more than, I think, more than 25,000 page document that has been submitted by NASA. So 14 days is sufficient for the judge, so that they can go through the evidence and ensure that when they come up with a ruling, ruling, they make sure they give a reasoning as to why they have arrived at that evidence, so that when the new president is Uhuru Kenyatta is being sworn in, it is that everybody would have been satisfied, and the judges would have given their reasoning as to why they are arriving at particular outcome.
All right, let's move on to something else now, and I'd like us to look at the headlines of the Daily Nation this morning. Members of Parliament plot to reject Serem cuts, and I'll start with you, Muli, as a Member of Parliament-elect, on your stand regarding your salaries. Kenyans are a little bit concerned that even before being sworn in, the salary issue has already come up, and apparently, according to some of the Members of Parliament-elect, they will not accept the new, suggestions given by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Your stand on that?
Actually, I have not come to that of salary. I'm waiting to be given the order of Parliament to start working. So, about the issue of salary.
So for you, you're okay with the recommendations? Are you telling me that you're not aware of the recommendations?
What I know about the SRC Commission, we need to know how the issue of the salary, the commission, was it established to start the salaries or to bring the consolidation of the economy in terms of salary of the country? Because having issue of MP salary is not the issue of the country. It is supposed to be the issue of everybody. My criticism to them is that they should have given the issue of salary from office messenger, doctors, police officers, because you go to our institution, you get our office messenger earning 12,000. The same institution, a manager is earning 1 million. So SRC Commission should give everything before every government comes in place. Okay, I think they are coming to members of parliament because by that time the parliament has gone for recess. So they were opportunists by that time. But if this country cannot work with our salaries, what can we do? Because we can see the nurses are crying. They need better salary. Everybody's crying need better salary. So we cannot be only the members of parliament who are earning the big salary.
So are you saying that as a member of parliament, once you're sworn in, you're okay to go with SRC recommendations of a pay cut?
My issue I have no problem with. Actually, before when I was going to put, I did not know even the salary. I don't know even they are earning 10,000. I came to know reason in the media they are earning this amount of money. My interest was to legislate and articulate the progressive of this country.
So are you saying that even as you're
so
going for member of
no
parliament,
issue,
you didn't know what amount of money you need?
Yeah. Because my interest there is I knew there must be a return. So by bringing me my issue of salary before I'm getting sworn in, it's like starting now putting bridges before my...
Cherargate, do you believe what he's telling us here? Or is he being just a pure politician who wants to be politically correct? He didn't know how much he was going to earn as he's going. Who applies for a job and they don't know how much they're going to earn?
No, personally, when I was running for Senate, I've never known how much they are.
But they don't know.
It's simple.
Yeah.
Number two is, some of these issues that SRC is doing, their role is to advise. They are not supposed to implement. Number three is that even if you cut the salary, I don't mind earning any money because personally, I've been an activist in Nandi County for very long and I've been doing community work without pay. It means that if the only issue that SRC should do, and even Parliamentary Service Commission should do, is to ensure our offices are functional. Even if you give me 50,000 per month and you ensure that there is a car, there is an office that is functional so that we can have, for example, Senate does not have any resource that will allow you to run efficiently in the county to do your oversight role. So at the end of the day, the SRC should ensure that in as much as they are playing to the public gallery that they want to take a pay cut of members of parliament or legislators, they must also be practical that they ensure their offices are functional. And therefore, for example, as a senator, I have more than 6 constituencies and I don't have a problem being paid just like an MP. But what we need is a functional office so that we have people, I need to have people on the ground, contact people who can give me petitions so that as I present to the Senate, it makes my work easier. So SRC should have a proper recommendation. They should not play to public gallery. And we want the SRC also should come up with an all-sum approach on how to handle salaries of all public servants so that we are not being made to look bad at the expense of not doing their work, which is their work is to advise. They are not supposed to implement as by their role constitutionally.
All right, Paul, do you believe these gentlemen that they actually took a job without knowing how much they're going to be paid, and as a result, for them, it's service to the nation. It's not about how much they're going to be paid.
I think to me what is more important is the consideration SRC has come to. Because to me, I think first it's important to understand what the real issues are with MPs. Because one, I don't know why, first of all, I don't know why we need to adjust salaries downwards when inflation is on the rise, the cost of living is on the rise. Two, to me, Kenyans don't really understand what the role of MPs and senators are. In fact, to most Kenyans, MPs and senators are welfare officers. Yeah. Where if you have a funeral, correct, if you have a medical bill, if you demand school fees, these are realities that we cannot. Yeah. First of all, if you want to fail to be re-elected, is to try to tell any Kenyan that my work is legislation and oversight. They know that your work is, if they have any medical bill, they come to your place. Yeah, to me, SRC should be realistic and begin telling Kenyans how some of these things need to be addressed.
Yeah, correct.
Because you see, but you can't give somebody...
Wouldn't that begin, Paul, from the fact that they don't need hefty salaries because their job description is not to give handouts? That's not part of their work. As much as they possibly will get into office with that narrative, and that's what you're calling a reality, at what point does that change? Because SRC is saying that you do not need that money necessarily to give handouts to people. You're there to legislate and oversight.
That is what I'm saying, that it's not realistic. One, if you don't do it, nobody will be re-elected. So I can tell you, this election was more or less predetermined, or it was determined by who had more money than who. Because or who opened his home more than who. Because Wananchi tend to think that if you are more kind, then you are better at doing your job than the person who is not kind. Because even you go and look at even some of the senators who had an excellent record. Like you go and look at Hassan Omar, the amount of work he did in the Senate. Then you go and look at the votes he got. It simply tells you that Wananchi are still unable to see the difference between what is exactly your work.
So you're suggesting that we carry on with that narrative?
What I'm simply suggesting is that SRC needs to consider what is realistic when determining this pay cut. Because to me, you can't actually say that I've done it, I've also cut for the president, let me also cut for the MP. You look at how much access, like for example, he has even mentioned, for example, like let's say, if you are like county executive committee member in the county, you are given a car, that car is fueled. Why should an MP not get mileage allowance? Because he has to go, he has to meet, there's issues of public participation nowadays, he has to. But you see, SRC come up with some frapped figures and they say, because to me, more or less they are PR stunts, where you just come and you want to tell Kenyans that I'm working and I've gone for the big guy, without actually looking at what exactly
is the reality,
on the ground.
All right, Samson, you seem to agree a lot with Paul's sentiments.
Yeah, I agree with Paul, because some of these things that SRC should do is something that should make our offices function. Because, for example, our governor has everything. Has resources, uses official vehicles, and you want a senator to oversight a governor who controls 7 billion plus in any financial year. And these are senators, some senators run even a county that has 12 constituencies or even 9 or mine like 6. And I need to traverse under these different terrains. So it means we must have an ability to crisscross so that we ensure the Wananchi feel represented. And then number 2, if SRC want to cut the salaries, which I don't have any problem, they should do a culture change and value system so that, as my brother said, politicians are welfare officers of Wananchi. If there is a problem, even if I after leaving this studio, I meet my resident from Nandi County, they will be uncomfortable. They will see me as mean if I don't leave them with 1,000 shillings or 2,000 shillings.
That is the culture that we're trying to finish. So one might say that you are actually encouraging it. You are actually helping it flourish because you feel that you have to. And the truth of the matter is you've not been put in that office to be a welfare officer. At what point do you define your role to the electorate?
It is
If not now.
it is our culture and Kenyans. It is the value. So SRC should teach them so that, because the moment I start telling them that my work is legislation and oversight, I will not get re-elected or I will not have gotten votes.
All right, Honorable Muli, do you agree that SRC is the one that's supposed to be doing the culture change and not you? I think it should be the other way around. I think it should be the members of parliament letting the electorate know that you have put me in office to take care of your future, and your future is not in a handout.
My brother, I think SRC, they have their job. They have done their job by reducing the MP salary. Now we don't know what is the next move they are going, where they are going to reduce or increase. What I'm saying is, the SRC Commission should have advised the government. Kenya we are in that world, economy growing. Everything is coming in the morning, is going high. Nurses are crying for salary. Teachers are crying for salary. Police are crying also for salary. So SRC should be advising the country per year. What is the total salary scale we are paying the people? Actually, they do the custodian of the ministries, carrying all the expense of the ministries, to be able to advise the government on salary scale. But to me, it came to be funny when everybody takes a politician is going to parliament to make money. Actually, many of the politicians, they go to parliament, they still driving these big cars, they are still having big houses. So people will look politicians like, oh, you guys, you are earning big money, that's why you are driving these big cars. They forget that many politicians we go before we go to parliament, some are doctors who already have those things. Some are lawyers, some are businessmen who have these things. So what we are saying is, you have given me the position to take this challenge, becoming a member of parliament, to oversight, to legislate, and I carry all the mandate of the count, sub-count, to the national government and everything. So we need the facilitation to be able to be carried well. The common man in the ground does not come for me for medical or school fees because he is the right or he is supposed to do that. He's forced by the circumstances. The Kenyan people are poor. People have problems, my brother. If you can go to the villages, you get youth have no job. You go to the villages, you get people have no medical facilities. And these people, when they see you as a member of parliament, they see you are the only solution. So that's why we have to take care of these people. We cannot tell the SRC to go to teach people where they're supposed to get the money. Where are you going to tell them to get the money? Where are you supposed to teach them to get to get the job? And the country say they have no jobs. So it remains to be a challenge of this country. A legislator, whether Senate, whether in Parliament, they carry a big mandate. What is there we need to make sure that the committee, they work, the country go to the next generation because of proper oversight, and that the youth get job, and the community gets the growth, that they stop this dependency of politicians.
All right, Paul, your closing comments on this particular subject in regards to SRC's proposal for a pay cut.
To me, I don't think that it is. To me, I think it's more or less a PR stunt. I don't think it's something that has been properly researched, because to me, they first of all need to understand what the job entails, what the common mwananchi expects of their MPs and the senators before they come with this pay cuts. And to me, you need to consider issues like inflation, the cost of life. You cannot really adjust somebody's salary going down when the price of unga is on the rise, when inflation is on the rise. To me, they didn't do a proper job. To me, this is a PR stunt.
Okay.
Let me add something on that.
Yes, sir.
Then the SRC should tell us, where did they do public participation? Have they asked Kenyans that only MPs should have a pay cut? So those are some of the things that we should have, as my brothers, we should have a structured engagement so that we ensure the public are also aware. They should have consulted and done a public participation according to Article 10 on national values and principles of good governance. They didn't do that. We have just been seeing in newspapers, how did they arrive at that? I wish they would have consulted Kenyans and then ensure that they get what the job entails to be a senator or to be an MCA or to be a member of parliament or any other type of legislator in this country. So they should have carried a proper research and do a public participation. But my issue is simple. As a senator of Nandi, I don't have a problem with pay cut, but they should ensure we are well facilitated and our offices are functional.
All right, let's look at something else, and I'll start with you, Paul. And this is in regards to, we don't know what the courts are going to rule in regards to the petition, but should Kenya go back to a re-election, how does that affect business in the House?
Basically, what is before the Supreme Court is the presidential election petition. It does not affect any other function of this country or of legislation. You will realize that in Kenya, the executive arm is very, very different from the legislative arm. Basically, if you look at what is before the Supreme Court, NASA have presented 11 issues. And actually, their main point of contention, they are saying that this election has been so badly managed that IEBC decided to flout all constitutional norms. They decided to not go through the law when they're doing this election, such that it's not important to say who's won or who's lost this election. And they want fresh election. Basically, they say our contention is only the presidential election petition. So I can actually tell you that all other structures will move, all other systems will move. Now the whole issue is that maybe the government or IBC must, if the petition succeeds, look for more financing within 60 days to do a fresh presidential election. What is there only affects the presidential election. But it's also important to note, because I've seen Wananchi asking that, why should it only be the presidential and not all other elections? You realize if you look at the electoral laws that, one, there are general principles that guide the conduct of elections of everybody else. Then there's a different set that concerns the conduct of presidential elections. So it is important to note that the issues you expect in a presidential election are not the same issues you expect in an MCA election. So Wananchi should actually get to understand that the standards and the conduct of presidential election is a little bit different, and even the regulations are a little bit different from the elections of all other officers.
All right, Chinage, you seem to, do you agree with Paul that that's the way it should be?
No, I think, I hope he's not holding brief for NASA. What is that nasikia kuna vifaranga vya computer? Because what I would have expected, because personally I'm not a generated led senator, computer senator, because I got over 95% of the vote. I've seen them developing a narrative that we had 54%, the president and some governors. But what I would wish is that we should avoid double standards, because I think the principles of electoral process as per Article 86 of the Constitution is that if there is a problem, I would have expected the NASA, from even the MCA to the governors that we have, they should have rejected results in solidarity. They are only contesting the presidential because the person who is contesting on the president, his election integrity is always a question when he is not winning. It is, if he had won, even if it was a shambolic process, he would have said the election was free and fair. So we should understand also, as we try to protect, this is the first time. And I think you agree with all election observers. They were impressed on how elections were being done in Kenya. European Union, the Carter Center, and all, and even the African Union were impressed.
And the issue that is being raised here is not to do with the process. It's more to do with transmission. It's a transmission of the process. But you remember, it is the same guys went to court. And the court, in fact, Jubilee told them on the other side that you should not allow, we should have a manual backup. And now they were saying when everything was being relayed to the bombers, they contested by saying we need Form 34A and 34B. And then when it was brought in, they have now said it was being doctored, which is they were the ones that said in every polling station. And of course it is by the law, and the courts are agreed that the moment the polls are being counted, they are tabulated, they should send electronically or via SMS to the bombers, which was now the chairman of IBC, was the returning officer of the president. And that was, and then another aspect, when you look at the electoral law, it was that after they counted and sent via SMS, they were supposed to scan that copy and send it to the bombers. That was National Tallying Center. So the issue is, do they agree? Because are they comfortable? Because now it doesn't matter how it was transmitted. They now have copies of around 54,000, which 40,000 plus
polling stations that we have in this country that will now have a Form 34A and 34B that will be used in evidence at the Supreme Court.
All right, I'll hold that thought as we now release KTN Home, and Life and Style begins on KTN Home in just a few minutes. Right here on KTN News, we continue with this conversation. Remember, you're welcome to participate, and you can do that via social media. The Twitter handles are going to be displayed as we continue with the show. For now, KTN Home, we say goodbye. Honorable Muli, what's your thoughts on that? The fact that the bone of contention here is mainly the presidential, and seems like all the other, including governors who had even come out to say that they have an issue with the results, have more or less conceded, the likes of Kidero.
Okay, one thing which I'm differing with many people is that we cannot generalize the election. If your election, that constituency has the problem. If you are a member of parliament, if you are a governor, your account has a problem. Come up and prove. Start telling about Mombasa count, Nairobi count, Kisumu count. We want the exact place which you have the problem. In the issue of petition of a president, it is not only going to bring the change in parliament, but we are going to have the trust of if today the election is being NASA winning the case, because everybody is carrying the day say, oh, Jubilee will win, NASA will win. But the verdict will come with the court. If today NASA winning this case, the court will earn the best trust for this nation. Again, the democracy of this country would have been upgraded. But IBC will
Are you suggesting that if it went against this
is what
then the court will have acted unjustly?
This is what I'm trying to show you. A general view of the public that Jubilee feels they should win the case. NASA feel they should win the case. But now who filed the case? Who filed the case is the NASA. So in the view of many people, the justice is when the person who filed the case gets the answer.
Isn't that a skewed way of looking at things?
Yeah, I think that is the narrative that NASA has been in building. They have been developing a failed threat. That is why they are saying if it does not go our way, we will realize that the Supreme Court is compromised. Which is when my brother says if NASA wins, the trust of judiciary will not. But they have been winning cases before the election on issues of even transmission of results. We have been having issues of.
This is the question which you ask. You ask if election is repeated. You do not ask the issue of winning. If today the election is repeated, that independence which you are saying that people to stop asking what, it will start being seen. If you ask today if the election is not repeated, there will be a lot of questions that how the judgment came. What the judgment they will bring to us, that is what now we are going to read and say that, yes, the independence of the court and there is justice. Because the issue of NASA is not what the justice will be. It is we win the case. But the issue of the judgment is what the judge will bring, tell us this is the judgment. So I'm saying the judgment which comes with this court is one going to determine the half-grant of independence of the court, is also going to determine now the IBC.
But don't you think that you should be saying that regardless of what the judgment is going to be, because they are an independent and we trust in the judiciary, regardless of the outcome, it is fine. That's what they'll have found, and you've put legal minds to look at it.
Yes, this is the trust which it lives with the Kenyan society.
Do you trust the judiciary?
Yes, of course I trust.
So whatever judgment they give,
whatever the judgment they will give,
is okay.
It's okay to me.
Yeah, but to me, we don't have a problem with any outcome because we respect the independence of judiciary. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, any decision that the courts will make will have a reasoning. It is not something they just make statements without a reasoning. So in either way, the outcome that might come, you should not say if justice will not favor us or we will not win in our own way. That's why you have their principles saying if we do not win in the courts of law, they have extra constitutional mechanisms on that, and we have had them building some interesting ideas.
I want us to wind up on that. Let me come to Paul. I need us to wind up on that because I have two other things I'd like us to talk about before we finish.
Yes.
Paul.
To me, as a lawyer, I'm more keen on some of the issues NASA has raised in their petition. And to me, I'm more keen on what will be the judiciary's opinion, especially the Supreme Court's opinion, on some of these issues raised more than the general. For example, NASA have said that in their petition that IBC decided to create on the election day some polling stations that were never gazetted. For example, I'd really like to know what will be the judiciary's opinion, the Supreme Court's opinion, when somebody decides to create polling stations that are not gazetted on the election day.
If at all they did create.
If at all they did create. Just a minute. Secondly, NASA has saying that our agents were chased from certain polling centers. If at all they were chased from those polling centers, I'd really like to know the Supreme Court. Thirdly, NASA is saying that Raila Odinga's results have been reduced in some areas. If it really turns out that they've been reduced in those areas, I'd really like to know what is the Supreme Court's opinion. If they're like saying, for example, they've even also saying that there are even some polling stations where you get like one presiding officer has signed for like 7 polling stations. I'd really like to know what is the Supreme Court's opinion where one presiding officer has signed for. They've also even raised the issue of saying you can look at these 7, you can look at these 11 documents, and you can see that the handwriting is the same. I'd really like to know what is the Supreme Court's
And of course, they'll have to prove that that handwriting is the same. Maybe you'll need a forensic...
So to me, I'm more keen on some of these issues that they have raised and how the Supreme Court will look at them more than what will be the final judgment.
All right, I want us to move on to something else because we are limited by time. But this is to do with also the crackdown on NGOs. And I'd like to hear your take, Mr. Muli, on what your thoughts are on what is going on, because it seems like these are NGOs who are supporting, as it were, the petition that is in court, or are in favor, or have issues. They've raised issues regarding even the electoral process and the tabulation of the results that we have so far.
Okay, one, when you say an NGO is supporting, it is the right. Because if it's an individual who is supporting, because I don't see the NGO which come by itself as, to write a report to say that we are supporting. We know when they are supporting when they put the petition. We don't have NGO which you put the petition. And the one thing which you need to understand about PBO, political parties, they are not under PBO. Now we know the case which is in court is for NASA. So the issue of the government going to register the NGO, I saw they're acting over. They are reacting over to them. They should even have done a tribunal to ask them what is it, to understand these things in a written manner and in a proper oversight. But what the issue of the registering, I cannot support that.
Paul? Basically, to me, I think it's very unfortunate if the main reason why these NGOs or public benefit organizations were being deregistered so that they don't end up and present to the Supreme Court what they thought of this election. Yeah. To me, I think we are a free country, and to me, the state should not use its force to crack down and deny Kenyans from getting to know what exactly happened. So if it really turns out that they never had a problem with this, or they do, like for example, if it turns out that they knew that these people were evading taxes, but they didn't mind, until now it comes to a point where these people are now saying that, yes, we have an opinion on this Supreme Court. Then now you realize that you need to deregister them. Then it's very unfortunate for this country that the government can have information, it doesn't act on it. When they realize that this information is not to their favor, then they act. Then I think it's very unfortunate.
Although
not only for these NGOs,
there's no right time for justice. I guess justice can be done at any time.
No. It is outright malice that you know something, but you only come out to implement it when you realize that it's going to, they're going to present something that is not related to that very particular function, but is related. For example, it's rumored that actually they never had a problem, but when they learned that these NGOs were likely to go to the Supreme Court to challenge the outcome of this presidential election, then they said that the first thing is to do to register them, to deny them that status of even approaching the Supreme Court.
All right.
I think the NGOs are not above law. And therefore, there is no right time to say they were being registered because of rumored that they were going to Supreme Court. The issue is if they don't follow the law, they must be registered. And I think when even they appeal to the Matiang'i, the CS, the acting CS for Interior, has already formed a committee to look into the issues. But the issue is we're having NGOs trying to blackmail the government, because it is rumored that they wanted to go to Supreme Court after the government went after them. So they were trying to intimidate and blackmail the government simply because the government was after them after evading taxes and committing. And in fact,
but
they were becoming.
How would it be blackmail if what they are doing is just practicing their constitutional right? If they have indeed established that they have an issue with, maybe, for instance, the electoral process or the transmission, they are merely just exercising, and there is a legal way of doing that.
No, but the issue is they were not, all Kenyans, even me, I pay taxes. The issue is the government and the government agencies had found out that they had not been complying with KRA regulations and even on issues of security matters. So it doesn't mean that even if they should not have been left up to a particular time. As we have said,
it was alleged that they were not complying. We're not sure.
No, of course it was alleged they were not complying, but the government has a right to act any time. But they have a right to act any time based if you are not, you cannot be allowed to perpetuate an illegality simply because you are supposed to go to Supreme Court to challenge the presidential election.
I think, Senator, you cannot say that because I'm not paying tax, I have no right to question the government. This NGO, they operate on this act. They are supposed to be a procedure if I'm not paying tax, which you are supposed to ask, but not to move immediately because I've said that there will be election petition, you will register me. So that when I go to the court, you say that I'm not registered. If it's about the payment of the tax, this NGO, they operate with tribunal. We did not see any tribunal being asked why they are not paying tax, why they are not doing this. Because now today I've come to ask you, why is this happening? You tell me you are not paying tax. We understand every Kenyan, every institution in this country is supposed to pay the tax. But where were you before I asked you about election?
But the issue is very simple. When you argue that based on the issues that you are not paying taxes, it is not an issue that you should take to the tribunal. That's an illegality. It is an offense. So at the end of the day, the government has a right to go and act and ensure that you must comply. And in fact, my learned senior has said it is rumored. So it is like a battle that the NGOs wanted to go to Supreme Court because we don't have any substance or any evidence that showed that the NGOs wanted to challenge the presidential or any type of election that we had in this country. So we are just using rumors, which could mean it is a battle, to mean that they wanted to go to Supreme Court. That is why the government had a crackdown. And the government should be allowed to do their work by ensuring that everybody complies with the law. It is not an issue that should be taken to tribunal. I think there are some matters, even legally, there are some matters that should be taken to tribunal, but there is an illegality. It doesn't mean when an NGO commits a criminal act, it should be taken to tribunal. Some of these things are supposed to be handled by the government because they are being used, allegedly is being used by Fasul says, they are being used to channel some funds, which becomes a threat to national security. And therefore, Matiang'i and all other apparatus were forced to act to protect the security, the national security and interest of all Kenyans.
All right,
that
Paul,
is why they acted.
What's the way forward in this regard?
The way forward is that we need a responsible government because I can tell you, one, I don't think it is in the best interest of this country. You look at how many of these NGOs are operating in the country. They employ a substantial number of Kenyans. Two, most government functions are actually supported or financed by a greater and a bigger margin by most of these organizations. To me, the government has an opportunity to do its work. And I can actually tell you it's not only these non-governmental organizations, there are even personalities where the government knows and they are aware that maybe you have issues, but they don't come for you because you've not raised any issue that affects them. But when you just raise an issue, then KRA comes on you, and they put on some hefty and very heavy penalties that you now begin asking yourself, or now you begin telling them that now we need to talk, and then now I'll drop this. So to me, this government need to stop acting like KANU. If there are issues that they know, because for example, the government is a regulator. As a citizen, I need to be asking them, for how long have they known that AFRICOG have been financing some organizations interfering with the security of this country? For how long have they known that AFRICOG has been evading taxes? Why now? And why must they do it? Because you see, there's even a procedure for deregistering an NGO. You don't just come and you issue a statement and you say, I've deregistered you. Go and look at the act. You must give them an opportunity to respond to some of the issues you've raised, but you can actually see if it comes out to be true that the whole aim was to deny them a legal status to approach the Supreme Court, if that was what it was.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to wind up there because of time. Thank you very much. We have Samson Cherargei, the Nandi Senator-elect. We also have Fabian Muli, Member of Parliament-elect for Kangundo. And last but not least, Paul Aul, who's a lawyer and also a political analyst. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the State of the Nation. For now, we're going to take a short break right here on Kivumbi 2017. But do stay with us. We've got some stories that are making headlines coming up.